This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters Radio. It is Friday at 11:30, and we have a great show for you today. We have with us Gorick Ng, who is the author of the book from Harvard Review Press called The Unspoken Rules. He will be joining us very, very shortly. In fact, he's on the screen right now. But if you are a longtime listener, you know we always reserve just the first few minutes of the show to tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Houston and the Gulf Coast region when it comes to financial literacy. Uh, don't really have very many calendar announcements for you, but I am going to share a little bit of news that came out in the Houston Chronicle. And since I am on a go-to meeting, I'm actually able to share the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up here hopefully. So there was an article that was published on July 6th, and this is about KPFT, which prior to the pandemic, we were being broadcast live out of KPFT, and then the studio kind of went on a hiatus. They are part of the National Pacifica Network, and it does look like the KPFT has been put up for sale. Anybody who knows the history of KPFT, this location that we have was actually donated by a listener. It is volunteer supported, and so this is kind of a historical thing here for them to actually put it up. The article goes on to state that any proceeds are going to be used to pay off debt, but also to relocate the radio station. And so we'll say to be determined to kind of see what's going on with that. But there's also some really good pictures on here from the Chronicle. KPFT was one of the only radio stations that could say when we opened in the 1970s that we were blown off the air by the Ku Klux Klan, rebuilt. 3 months later, they turned around and did it again, but they finally caught the guy and he went to prison. So that was kind of how the Houston location of Pacifica started there. So we'll just kind of put a pin in that and keep that, see how that goes there. Let me stop sharing that now, and then we will get Gorick, who has been patiently waiting for us here. And let me go ahead and just introduce the topic. The book is called The Unspoken Rules. Now, Gorick is a Harvard career advisor, and he shares the secrets to navigating an early career that we all wish that we knew when we started out and that aren't taught in school. He specializes in coaching first generation low income students. He's managed new employees at his time at Boston Consulting Group and is also a researcher with managing the Future of Work project at Harvard Business School. Gorick, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's see. Oh,
Thanks so
there you
much,
go.
Chris. Appreciate you having me here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're excited because the content of the book, I've got a reader's copy here. Let's see, if I can get on the green screen without blocking it out here. What if I put it right here? Here we go. We've got a reader's copy of the book that came out in April. So this is a pretty new book. And when we talk about, it's always good information for things that we need to know when we're looking for careers, but we're kind of in a different day and age than a year ago when, to be in college and to be kind of starting your career. Let me start with this. The book, The Unspoken Rules, why did you write this?
Yeah, I would say it came from both the head and the heart, where from the heart, I was the first in my family to pursue a higher education. And so, whereas my single mother who left school when she was 12 years old had high expectations for me, she hadn't been in many of the spaces that I was looking to navigate. And so, so much of getting through school, getting a job, and then succeeding in a job really came from trial and error and the kindness of the universe and mentors who took me under their wings. And from that perspective, I started asking myself, well, does it really have to be this way? Is it really the case that we have to go through the first decade of our career through trial and error after having spent 16 years plus of our lives bubbling bubbles and filling in multiple choice questions in school? There's so much that school doesn't teach about how to survive and thrive in the real world. So what if I can bottle up so much of what one learns through trial and error and turn it into a concise toolkit, which is where this all comes from. At the same time, I started thinking to myself, well, it seems as if the world that we live in is one that takes for granted the fact that if you're an early career professional, if you're in your first year, in your first 6 months, if you're straight out of school, that you're going to be useless, if I had to put it concisely. And I thought to myself, does it really have to be this way? And if I think about the trial and error that we all go through, well, could we accelerate the learning curve of someone just starting out so they can ramp up more quickly, perform more effectively, and ultimately save your company time, money, stress, and all of those things that are associated with bringing on someone new?
I love it. I love it. It's such a great topic. I kind of touched on this earlier, but what would you say are the career prospects and challenges facing the pandemic generation of graduates that we're seeing?
Yeah, I would say that for those who had more fires to fight during the pandemic, it's been an uphill battle from the very get-go when it comes to even getting internet access. I mean, in my role as a career advisor at Harvard, I have a number of students who ended up having to drive for half an hour, 45 minutes to the local, not so local, I suppose, coffee shop to use their Wi-Fi to get the class. And they've got family challenges and burdens and have had to take on part-time, sometimes even full-time jobs to make ends meet. And so for those students, which quite frankly is the average student or the most prevalent student in America these days, getting back on your feet is not an easy task where you're catching up on school. You didn't have the opportunity, the time to take on those internships that some of your more privileged peers may have been able to get through family and friend connections. So it's a tough time. However, I would say that we're talking at a time when jobs are coming back and employers are hiring like crazy. And so if I were to be talking to an early career professional right now or a student who's still in school, it, yes, there are a lot of reasons to be down, but at the same time, this is perhaps the best time to be joining the economy than ever.
There's
The
a
real question
lot of
is,
people hiring. It's true.
the question is, how do you translate what you've done during the pandemic into bullet points and talking points for an employer? That's number one. Number two is, how do you navigate to the Venn diagram of what you want and what is out there? So a lot of the jobs that are out there today, some of them are jobs that are career building, many of them are not. So how do you navigate your way to an upwardly mobile career given what you have? That becomes the question nowadays.
So I love that. Being able, the roadblock of kind of translating what you've done during the pandemic to this new world we're in, and then two, really being able uh, to what you want compared to what's actually out there right now. And so getting ahead of that is a challenge. You also mentioned even just having internet access. Some of these students have had to go to coffee shops where something that might have been seen as a luxury prior to all of this is a utility we all have to communicate here. So some unique challenges there. What about how can an early career professional or college graduate navigate a tight job market with a leg up on the competition?
Yeah, I would say that it's time to put the traditional notion of applying to jobs to rest. It's actually rather, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not so much about applying to jobs. You have to apply for sure. There's going to be paperwork involved in this process, but clicking the submit button is only a quarter of the battle. Making sure that someone behind the scenes knows that you exist and can bang the table to make sure that you get noticed is really what differentiates someone who gets hired from someone who doesn't. And so for someone who's looking for a job right now, it's helpful to go onto these job boards to see what may be available, but what may be available may not necessarily, and frankly, it doesn't represent what you could potentially do. So I'll say two things here. One is to take stock of what is it that you want to do. Start there. where do you see yourself in 2, 3, 5, 10 years? Who would you like to impress in the future, and what will they be impressed by? And find yourself at a company, at an organization, in a role that's going to set you up for that long-term path. You may not get the job that you want or the career path that you want right from the get-go, but your first job is what leads to your second job, which is what leads to your third job. So having a sense of where you want to go can give you a bit more clarity around what first job to take. That's the first thing. The second thing is, once you take stock of what you want, coming back to that Venn diagram of what you want versus what's available, once you take stock of what you want, then the question becomes, all right, are these jobs the types that are posted, or are they not posted? If they are posted, certainly helpful to apply, but it's insufficient to just apply. You need to reach out. So can you find the email of the recruiter or the hiring manager to put a face to a name, a voice to a name? Or do you know someone who is connected to this person, let's say on LinkedIn, who can broker an introduction so that you can introduce yourself and stand out from the competition? And then the last piece is, what if your desired career path or position doesn't yet exist? Well, just because an opportunity isn't posted doesn't mean it's not available or it couldn't be created. So getting into the habit of looking for someone who you might want to work with and work for, an organization whose mission you believe in, and once again, trying to find an introduction, or if you don't have an introduction, guess their email. Send them a cold email and pitch yourself and talk about how you're competent, you're committed, and you're compatible, those 3 C's that I end up talking about in the book.
I love it. I love it. So this is a lot of really good information for people who are looking. The first thing you mentioned was just getting noticed. You know, that's a challenge before all this stuff happened, and now that a lot of it is online, and you're not even sure if you're going to have an in-person interview where there's the body language and all that stuff, the idea of getting noticed is a different thing. And then what's available out there, what's available may not reflect what you're limiting yourself to, or what you want to do. Asking yourself, what is that role? What are you really wanting to do? Maybe not starting with that first job, but putting yourself in a position where that role can move up to it. You even mentioned creating a position and that sort of thing. And then, looking for things like LinkedIn. I really like that one. I was having a conversation this week about somebody who used to work for me, who is now a CPA, who's got a full-time job. And his father was telling me that he had seen somebody on CNBC that he really liked, and he reached out to him, and it turned into a job for him. And so the idea of that, like LinkedIn and that thing, there's always this kind of firewall. People don't like to get outside of their comfort zone and approach people, but that seems like a really good, it kind of dovetails with what you're talking about here. So I love that. Well, let me ask you, what are the unspoken rules of starting a career off right?
I would start with the 3 C's, which is really the North Star of my book that I talk about right up front, where the 3 C's stand for competence, commitment, and compatibility. And the idea is, the minute you show up as a professional, where showing up could be in the form of an email, a cover letter, a resume, a coffee chat, and, and of course on your first day, first week, first month, first year in a new role, the people around you are sizing you up, and they're asking themselves 3 questions. Question 1 is, can you do this job well, which is competence? Question 2 is, are you excited to be here, which is commitment? And question 3 is, do we get along, which is compatibility. So competence, commitment, compatibility, the 3 C's. Your job, and frankly, all of our jobs, it's to convince the people around us to answer yes to all 3 questions all the time. You can imagine why that's the case, because if you aren't showing competence, people aren't going to trust you with more important responsibilities, let alone your core responsibilities. If you're not demonstrating commitment, people are going to be hesitant to invest in your career, given that you may not even be around for long. And if you're not flexing that compatibility, you may not pass what some people call the airport test. Maybe airport is a term that needs to be rethought in the post-COVID or still the COVID world. But it's this idea of, Chris, if you and I got stuck at an airport together due to inclement weather or whatever, will we want to sit beside each other and hang out? Or are we going to want to go our separate ways? That's all about compatibility. Do I want to be around you on a regular basis? It's a tricky one to be talking about because people will maybe gravitate towards those who have a similar background, who may look like, talk like, or have the same backgrounds or interests as people that they're around. However, there are certain strategies on being able to elevate your compatibility, which I talk about. So really thinking about when you enter a professional situation, using the 3 C's as a lens through which to look at your performance relative to your coworkers' performance, whether the people around you are thinking about these 3 C's or even recognize that they exist. They exist, it's just maybe buried inside of people's heads.
I love it. I love it. And so these unspoken rules that we're talking about, we're talking about the book Unspoken Rules, Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right. Let me see if I can get it. There we go, in the camera here. That's really kind of some of the core of what you talk about in this book, the 3 C's, the competence, the commitment, the compatibility. These are all huge for people looking for just getting started and getting, them to say yes to all three of them. Now I'm going to just kind of pivot a little bit, and as like myself, I have employees. As a leader, what do managers need to know about engaging young employees?
It's a hot topic right now, especially at a time when so many early career professionals, frankly, all professionals, are thinking about maybe leaving their current jobs and looking for something different and that's more aligned with what they're interested in, good at, and passionate about. And so when I think about what it takes to increase the retention of your team, it really comes down to another three set of C's, which unfortunately didn't get a chance to make it into the book, but that I've been thinking about a lot, which is the 3 C's of competence, consistency, and consideration. Where the idea is when you're being sized up by your employees, they're asking themselves 3 questions. One is, do you know what you're talking about? Which is competence. Do you care about the people behind the work? Which is consideration. And do you walk your talk and do you treat people fairly? Which is consistency. So competence, consistency, and consideration. And so when I think about how to better engage these early career professionals, I think a lot about consideration. I think it's something that's top of mind for everyone of how did you manage during the pandemic and how are you managing people at this time of need? And so much of consideration at the early levels is all about really framing your job as more than just a job. And it can be difficult for for employers of entry level employees, because entry level employees and early career professionals are often seen as not that productive, fungible, high turnover resources rather than as your future leadership bench, which ends up leading to a much more transactional relationship, which I feel like is a bit of a missed opportunity. And so instead of seeing this as showing up, clocking in, clocking out, tossing work over the fence, and seeing these early career professionals as these fungible resources, really thinking about, okay, let's have a conversation about why you took on this job in the first place. And I talk about the importance of knowing your story, of the story you tell yourself in the shower, as well as the story that you go on to tell other people in a job interview. Having that conversation of, hey, where do you see yourself? Coming back to so much of what we just talked about, where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years? Where do you see yourself in your next job? Let's be real. Your first job very likely isn't going to be your last job. So there is going to be this inevitable likely time when we'll go our separate ways. But let's make the most out of the time that we have together, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, however long. Let's make a list. Let's make a grocery list of what do you want to get out of this experience? Who do you want to meet? What skills do you want to acquire? What do you want to learn about? How can I help you achieve those goals? Once you have a sense for why a person is even in this role in the first place, now you can all of a sudden find opportunities and projects and assignments that fit with their goals, their unstated goals that often go unsaid and unspoken. And in doing so, you can find yourself to the intersection of another Venn diagram, which is the Venn diagram of what you care about and what your employees care about, because it's really at that intersection where good work lives.
I love it. I love it. So it's good advice for managers and leaders. I mean, you talked about the competence, the consistency. Do you know what you're talking about? I remember before doing financial services when I managed at a bookstore, if I asked somebody to sweep, I would show them how to sweep. Lead by example, but then also the consideration. That relationship, even if it's a short-term relationship, you're growing people, and what can we do with the time that we have together while you're here, so that really making it more than a job. That is great advice for leaders and people who want to have happy employees. Let me shift one more time, and we've got just 4 more minutes. So the time's going by fast here, but what are some of the most common early career blunders that you see out there?
I would say the biggest one is a lack of ownership or an ownership mindset. And I define ownership as not just getting the job done or completing the task, but by taking a step back and really managing the entire process end to end. Where and I'll say as well, this is very much a two-way street, where on the part of the early career professional, thinking back to when I was coming out of school, students will have spent 16 plus years of their lives bubbling bubbles, finding the right multiple choice answer to this quiz. So much of school is reactive, waiting for the next assignment to come, coloring within the lines, versus really seeing the big picture. And so, as I think about my own transition from school to work, I was in reactive mode or student mode versus owner mode, proactive mode. At the same time, managers, because they're busy, because they've got other fires to fight, often aren't all that clear about what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and by when it needs to be done. And so when I think about what early career professionals can do to really stand out and to transcend the stereotype that someone who's in their early career isn't going to be all that useful to an organization, I think back to advice that one of my early managers told me, which is, even though your manager may have that manager title, your job is to manage your manager, not the other way around. What does that mean? It means appreciating that the first time your manager is thinking about this task is when this meeting began. And the last time your manager is thinking about this task is at the end of this meeting. The time between this meeting and the next meeting is the time when your manager is entrusting you to keep them posted, to manage the process, to be proactive, to flag issues. And when issues do come up, that you'll go to your manager not just with an open-ended question like, what do I do? But instead to go with proposals of, Chris, I noticed this issue and that issue. I propose this. What are your thoughts? Or would you like for me to pursue path A, path B, or path C? I was thinking of path B for these reasons. What are your reactions? So really going to the table with proposals rather than just problems, that's what separates these high performers from these mediocre performers. And I would argue through the book that these are skills that can be taught.
I love it. I love it. Well, we are right here at the end of the show. We could have just kept going. I feel like we just skimmed the surface for listeners and potential readers here who would like to get the book, The Unspoken Rules. Gorick, how would somebody find out more information about the book?
Yeah, the best place to go is my website, which is gorick.com. That's GORICK.com. There, you'll be able to download the first 27 pages of my book, get a preview. You'll be able to find the different retailers where you can get the book, whether it's Barnes & Noble, Amazon, your indie bookstore, etc. And I'm active on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, so feel free to find me, connect with me. I'd love to get your reactions on this content and how we might be able to bring it to your organization.
I love it. I love it. So we'll have, if you're driving, don't feel like you have to take notes, because we'll have podcast notes with all of the links on it as well. Gorick, thank you so much for visiting with us today, and have a great weekend there.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.